very warm welcome to Daily Dispatch, a show that gives you all the latest news and updates from the digital ecosystem. I'm Priyashe. Thank you very much for logging in. Time now to get you all the top news stories that we've been tracking for you this evening. Well, first up, reports suggest that Auto Classifieds platform CarTrade is all set to file its DRHP with markets regulator SEBI. The IPO will be a mix of primary and secondary share sale. Now, the company's online car auction platform has a presence in 80 cities, and as of last year, it claimed to be selling about 1 million vehicles a year. Well, moving on to the second headline of the day, crowdfunding platform Milap has partnered with Amazon to support SWAST and ACT grants to urgently procure and deploy oxygen concentrators in the country. The partnership with Amazon, which went live on May 2nd, has already raised close to 50 lakh rupees within opening hours, which will benefit close to 1 lakh people. Well, fintech company Paytm is setting up oxygen plants in 12 to 13 cities as hospitals across the country face oxygen shortage amid the pandemic. Meanwhile, logistics and supply chain startup Delivery has helped import 1,000 oxygen concentrators. Well, moving on to the final headline of the day, the online food tech unicorn Swiggy has announced that it has decided to move to a 4-day work week for the month of May 2021. Swiggy has also set up a pandemic support mechanism and an emergency support team to assist employees during this crisis. It's also launched the Swiggy Shield app and employee support hotline. Well, moving on to our second segment, I have with me someone who has been a part of this initiative called Fable, which is basically, an initiative where startup founders have come together to put together an NFT project, which is basically to do with crypto art. I have with me Arjun Malhotra. Thank you very much, Arjun, for joining us today on the Daily Dispatch. I want to begin by asking you about this initiative. It's been launched on the 28th of April. What has been the progress so far? And tell our audiences a little bit about the initiative, how it works.
Yeah, so there's a group of us who have been experimenting with different things in the crypto space. And we'd been working on coming up with an NFT. I think a couple of the interesting components of NFTs is some kind of gamification. So the initial idea we had was a lot more built out, but given everything that's been happening with COVID in the country, we figured it's better if we can just channel launching an NFT towards raising some funds there's an India crypto relief initiative. So we've got it out really quickly, and we've only really launched the absolute foundation of what we had wanted to build. And what we've launched is 22 major arcana cards, which from tarot reading, the 22 major arcana are sort of the fundamental parts of any storytelling. So if you're familiar with tarot reading at all, those are, whether it's the philosopher, the fool, the magician, all of those can form the different components of any story to be told. So the initial idea was much broader, was to use those components to build other things. But we quickly got a launch out last week. We made a couple of sales, I believe, and we're expecting to push forward over the course of this week and get the rest of them done too.
If you talk about the kind of traction this has been seeing on the platform, I wanted to understand, is it meeting your expectations? How you fit it in terms of the kind of response that you're getting? And is there a target in terms of how much you'd like to raise through this?
So we treated this more as an experiment than anything else. We wanted to learn about the NFT markets, around how distribution works, around what is required to be able to make sales happen. It's not much of a period, but funnily, most collectible sales that are done for social causes tend not to perform so well. And I think launching within kind of this movement of everything, within the backdrop of all the issues that we're having in terms of shortages of oxygen supplies and things, we figured that might be quite topical and quite helpful. But then there's other sort of components as well, right? So part of it is we're launching a collection rather than a piece of work by an individual artist. And what we're finding is that if you're an individual artist who has been doing a little bit in the NFT space and you have a bit of a followership, you're much more likely to make sales happen. Similarly, the mainstream tech audience for product startups is not necessarily the same as that for buying NFTs. And then The other kind of variable that comes up is, are you selling through your own platform, or you're going through platforms like OpenSea, which bring you a lot of distribution? There's been a lot of learning there. Even actually, we did technically launch the 28th, but we've kind of ported it over to a couple of different marketplaces just to see what happens. And we're still sort of seeing where that goes. But I think the interesting thing is that when you're selling to the NFT audience, you're typically selling to people who have owned crypto assets for a while. And they often have most of those assets in Ethereum or Bitcoin. And what NFTs are letting them do is give them something interesting to diversify their crypto asset base into. Because typically the cost price of what they've put in may be small, right? It may relatively be 5 or 6 lakhs that they put in. That's now worth a crore or 2 crores, right? You've heard some crazy stories in crypto, but part of the reason the NFT boom is being fueled is because people don't want it just sitting in a few different crypto currencies. You want to actually put in different kinds of assets. So we're treating it more experimentally and sort of seeing what the response is based on all of these factors.
Are there specific initiatives that you're targeting in terms of COVID relief that you're looking at this charitable work for?
Yeah, so there's the crypto relief initiative, which was started by Sandeep Nelwal at Polygon. And we'd actually reached out to him because we had been meaning to launch this. Initially, the focus was on raising money for children's education, and we were planning to do this in another 2 months or so. But one of the issues we were grappling with is, how do you convert cryptocurrency, which is what we'd be paid in, to fiat money, which is sort of actual Indian rupees, and then how do you fund that forward, and how do you do all the documentation? Not as simple as it sounds. So he's someone who had sort of been a little active in terms of saying that with all the COVID shortages that are going on, we're going to do a fundraiser that takes cryptocurrencies and puts them towards these some relief initiatives. So I believe most of that funding through the crypto relief project is going to ACT grants. I'm not sure exactly how they're exactly all the initiatives that it's going to, but the way we've done it is we've partnered with them. So we're not doing the transition to fiat. We're simply raising in crypto, and then we're giving it to the crypto relief project, which isn't run by us.
I wanted to understand going forward, since you said this is an experiment, will you be looking at more such, NFT, raises for charity that you'll be doing going forward, considering that we're in the middle of this pandemic and more such charity is the need of the hour at this point in time?
I think we'd love to. There's no immediate plans to do it. But that being said, we've learned a lot from this experiment and these are things that we can very quickly action. So like I was saying, one of the things that's really important with creating NFTs, unless you're an individual artist where you are creating an NFT that people will buy simply because it's a piece of your work or because they like the piece of work, a lot of the larger collectible projects have done well because of an element of gamification. So, for instance, you had the hash masks project, right, which has scarcity that's induced by the traits, which are certain variables that each of the pieces of work have. So there were something like 16,000 of those pieces of art. They were created in a templatized fashion, but certain traits had more scarcity, and that gave those traits more value. Similarly, you've got projects like CryptoKitties, where you've got different generations of these kitties that you can breed together, and they create essentially a new NFT. And depending on the characteristics of that, it's either more scarce, which makes it more valuable, or more common, which means it's not going to sell for as much. So I think when you're doing group collectible projects, if you're not an individual artist, you really need to be thinking through the gamification of those things. And I think getting the gaming dynamics right, to make them interesting, to create scarcity, to create an element of skill in the game as well, right? So part of what we were doing with Fable, the initial idea, was that you could create these different major arcana, which are the building blocks of different stories, and then it would actually let you buy a piece of work that represented the story. So for instance, if there's a story of Little Red Riding Hood, you might have 2 or 3 major arcana cards. You could have the Fool, you could have the Devil, and any other third one. And then if you hold those 2 or 3, it lets you buy a work of the Little Red Riding Hood by an artist at a substantial discount as compared to someone who doesn't have it. And that then incentivizes further trading of these major arcana cards, the character cards, and it gives them value as well. So it develops the ecosystem around the collectible. And I think getting that balance right is really important.
A final question before I let you go in terms of regulation from the government's standpoint. Do you think there is a fair bit of over-regulation as far as the crypto market is concerned? Do you think there needs to be more, easing of regulations to be done from the government's front?
The way I understand it is there's a lack of clarity more than over-regulation. I think the instinct that we've often seen in sectors that are new and exciting is if we don't really know what the implications of them are, there's a tendency to put blanket bans or press notes up that limit or just put a lot of risk to what people are doing. And I think that's the case within the crypto asset class today. So even with that said, there's a lot of people who have eaten that risk up and who are continuing to invest in and buy crypto assets. Whether they will be stamped out in terms of value, or whether the government will try and put embargoes around them in time is not something that's as clear, because there's been a little bit of flip-flopping, and they seem to be taking their time up. They seem to be taking their time to make decisions. And I think not knowing the implications of an asset class is not the right reason to not encourage people to innovate. I think we should kind of be on the forefront of understanding the implications of crypto assets and cryptocurrencies. And once we've fully experimented with those, then take more substantive calls. Because if we don't have an enabling regulatory infrastructure, then it incentivizes tinkerers to not play with crypto, and that just sets us back.
All right, Arjun, many thanks for joining us today on the Daily Dispatch, and thanks for your insights.
Thank you, Priya. Pleasure to chat.
Well, time now to wrap up this edition of the Daily Dispatch. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'll catch you tomorrow at 5 p.m. Goodbye and stay safe.